Ersten Speaker und zum ersten Sprecher vorzustellen. Wir haben ein Recording von Nikki Haley und Nikki Haley wird darüber sprechen, will Brexit encourage more Euroscepticism?
First, a disclaimer. I do not claim to be at all an expert on Nikki Haley's things, and I have literally copied and pasted from 2 of her speeches before the UN in order to emulate some of her speech patterns. I've literally copied her speech. I haven't, however, looked too much at her delivery of these speeches. So yeah, I don't think that this represents her politics at all. I just am attempting to use language that she might use if this was her policy. Thank you, Foreign Minister Johnson, for chairing this important and timely open debate. Thank you also, Secretary General Guterres, for your comprehensive thought I'd be being forced to defend sovereignty and integrity of my country, the United States, and ordinary as the United States is by far the single largest contributor to the United Nations and its agencies. We do this, in part, in order to advance our own values and our interests. When that happens, our participation in the UN produces great good for the world. Together we feed, clothe, and educate desperate people. We nurture and sustain fragile peace in conflict areas throughout the world. And we hold outlaw regimes accountable. We do this because it represents who we are. It is our American way. But we'll be honest with you. When we make generous contributions to the UN, we also have a legitimate expectation that our goodwill is recognized and respected. When a nation is singled out for attack in this organization, that nation is disrespected. What's more, that nation is asked to pay for the privilege of being disrespected. Why should we be condemned for merely supporting and encouraging our allies to reconsider their relationship to what they believe is an outlaw regime in Brussels? Neither our support for our allies nor the criticisms we've directed at the EU mean that we are turning our back on the old world entirely. In a spirit of goodwill that our detractors do not deserve, we would like to further explain our understanding of support for Europe with a less powerful EU. First, it can be tempting to take Europe's peace and security for granted. The United States is still committed to the institutions that help keep Europe safe. We will not waver in our support for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is the strongest alliance in history. We are working to make NATO even more effective, deepening cooperation among existing members, and keeping the door open to new allies who will fulfill the requirements for membership, while seeking to increase burden sharing. The United States also supports the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which helps to resolve Europe's conflicts. Europe is a continent of strong, stable democracies. And Europe is also a continent of flourishing economies that may benefit from close cooperation. While the nature of that cooperation may be shifting with Brexit, and other countries choosing to leave the EU as it stands now, the United States remains certain that the new relationships it forms with these sovereign nations will only strengthen Europe in the end. The U.S.'s partnership with the European Union has been deep and enduring. However, we also recognize that individual countries, such as the United Kingdom, with whom we share a special relationship, may be justified in their decision to leave the EU, and we will support them. The EU binds together countries that believe deeply in the cause of democracy, human rights, and economic freedom. And it has made Europe a more prosperous and more peaceful place. However, when it serves its own interests more than the interests of its member nations, it should expect that its members will react accordingly. Your average Joe sees the EU institutions in Brussels as nothing more than a collection of boondoggles that are raising his taxes. There have been earnest attempts at reform organized at a grassroots level, and yet Brussels has failed to respond adequately. Even after one of its founding members, the United Kingdom, voted to leave the European Union, the introspection from the side of the EU was as flimsy as cotton candy at a fair. Is it so hard to understand why so many of the citizens see the EU as a bunch of grifters who, when their responses are so inadequate? Mom and pop stores are forced to close around the continent because they can't compete with multinationals and the advantages that the EU has given them. Who needs cheaper zucchini and eggplants from Spain if you can't run a small business in Austria anymore? Despite this criticism, the United States continues to look forward to improving our cooperation with the EU. The United States may, from time to time, disagree with EU perspectives, as friends do, but it remains an important partner. And the United States also looks forward to building new bilateral agreements with all states who choose to reject the tyranny of Brussels. At the end of the day, no one should misinterpret occasional policy differences and debates as a signal of anything less than total commitment to our existing alliances in Europe, as well as potential new bilateral agreements. Beyond the issues of countries leaving the EU, there are still significant political and development changes to overcome on the European continent. Georgia's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders must be affirmed and respected. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the country's people are still waiting for their leaders to stop playing politics with ethnic divisions and focus instead on rooting out corruption and building a more stable future. In Cyprus, leaders are working to end the long-standing division of the island to achieve a settlement, which the United States strongly supports. The United States will remain Europe's strongest partner in promoting peace and prosperity. We will stand by the institutions and alliances that make us all more secure. And the deep ties that connect the United States and Europe will allow us to rise to the challenges we face today and overcome them together. At the end of this speech, there is also a larger point I would like to make. The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our rights as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon once again to make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit. Thank you.
Ganz vielen Dank, Frau Haley. Unser nächster Sprecher ist Dr. Alan Cunningham von der University of Manchester. und gibt eine Präsentation zu dem Thema Brexit in Irish perspective. I think Ellen is just about to set up.
Yes.
Fantastic. So viel Spaß.
Thank you. So I'm Dr. Alan Cunningham from the University of Manchester, but today, sorry, Dr. Alan Cunningham from, sorry. Good morning. I'm Dr. Alan Cunningham. I'm from the University of Manchester. I'm a writer and academic, but today I'll be primarily speaking as someone who was born in a very unique part of Europe, which I think is taking on a much greater significance. It's a town called Newry, which is about 5 kilometres from the border between Northern Ireland, the UK, and the Republic of Ireland. And I want to talk today about the Irish perspective on the Brexit process and how we see it as people from a very relatively unique region of the United Kingdom, and a region that has very specific problems, which I think haven't been properly addressed by the whole Brexit process. So the Brexit question was, should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union, or should it leave the European Union? A very simply phrased question, perhaps too simply phrased, given the full implications that have arisen post-referendum. Now, in an Irish context, and by Irish I mean both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, two different jurisdictions, but culturally, geographically, one region, many people would argue. In an Irish context, and with the Theresa May government red lines, this question, I would suggest, has become a much more specific one for people from Ireland. And the question becomes, what happens to Northern Ireland? Technically part of the United Kingdom, but there's a proviso which I'll talk about later. What happens to Northern Ireland if the UK leaves the single market and the customs union? And this question was raised by some people during the referendum process, but wasn't really addressed in any great depth. And I think people are starting to realize now that there are actually huge implications resulting from this question. So this but, which I mentioned, yes, Northern Ireland is technically part of the United Kingdom, but ... So that's, I would suggest, only one truth regarding this quite complex place. For example, Northern Ireland is the only part of the United Kingdom to share a land border with an EU member state, the Republic of Ireland. Another example of another truth that hasn't really been addressed about this place is that even before the Republic of Ireland became an EU member state, the border that existed separated towns from their historic hinterlands. So there were, for example, there's a town in the Republic of Ireland about 10 kilometres from Newry, which is in the north, called Dundalk. But there are regions of the countryside in the north of Ireland that would have been closer to Dundalk, and that would have been their historic, they would have been the historic hinterland of that city, that town. But because of the border, that's separated, so people started to go to other cities. Another truth about this region, beyond it simply being part of the United Kingdom, is that there's actually a very fractious history here and serious disagreement regarding the question of identity. You know, this question of whether someone feels British, Irish, or even Northern Irish. And I think it's a little bit helpful here, because none of this I felt was addressed during the whole referendum process. I'm going to give a very cursory, very brief synopsis of some of the historical elements that I think help in understanding some of the current Brexit issues as they relate to this region. So I want to step back a little bit and look at a little bit of history of Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, and Great Britain. So we have the United Kingdom, which Northern Ireland is a part of. But what is this United Kingdom? Where is this United Kingdom? Well, it's the United Kingdom of Great Britain, which is England, Scotland, and Wales, and Northern Ireland. If you are a British citizen, look on your passport. Northern Ireland is separated from Great Britain. It has a particularly unique identity. Now, Northern Ireland itself is a relatively new political construction, established only in 1921, and it only really emerged as a result of the complicated history between Ireland and England. So we come to this tricky Irish question, which also always seems to loom in British politics. Churchill talked about the dreary steeples of Fermanagh always coming back to sort of haunt British politics, and I think that's what's happening again with Brexit. We have this long history of struggle between the island of Ireland, the geographical island, the cultural island, and the central power of Britain, ostensibly I would say England. Now, there was definitely a religious element to this post the English Reformation. We had Catholic representing Rome and Europe versus Protestant representing the English and the Crown. But this religious element we know was really simply a mask for a struggle for power. Now, Ireland, being predominantly Catholic, was always seen as a potential site for European or Catholic attack. The English response was to invade Ireland and to plant or colonize with allies, people sympathetic to the Crown in England. Important point to remember here, plantation was relatively slow and piecemeal, however, okay? So there was plantation in the whole island of Ireland, but very slow and very piecemeal. Now, Ulster, which is in the north of Ireland, which comprises 9 counties, 6 of which are in Northern Ireland, was the last real remnant of what's sometimes termed the Gaelic order, where we had things like indigenous law, the Brehon law. We had the Irish language still being spoken, and we had local kings, the O'Neill, for example. This was very much outside English control, and there was very little plantation pre-1609. So this region was always a thorn in the English government's side. Now, with the Battle of Kinsale, this was the last chance it was felt to defeat the English in Ireland. There was defeat there, a horrible defeat, some European assistance, which didn't necessarily help. And then we had the flight of the Earls in 1607. And at this point, England realized, here's a great opportunity. The local power center has left. So the result was intense plantation in some Ulster regions. Now, this was a much more intense plantation that had happened in any other part of Ireland, and it changed the social, economic and political landscape there forever, much more than in any other part of the island. As a result, when Ireland struggled for independence from Great Britain, certain parts of the population, not all, in some parts, not all of Ulster, disagreed with that argument for independence. For the most part, they wanted to remain in the union with Great Britain as a Northern Irish state. The result was the creation of Northern Ireland and the Irish Free State, which was both created in 1921-22. And then we also had partition, an artificial border. There was no historical basis for this border whatsoever. We had this partition through artificial border, which was also altered as much as possible so as to create a Catholic minority in Northern Ireland. The Irish Republic was also established. And for some time there was relative quiet, until 1968. For a variety of reasons, primarily emerging from some civil rights disagreements, we had this period of intense, some call it a war. It's kind of euphemistically called the Troubles, from 1968 to 1998. A very serious and sad period in Irish history. And this is an example of one of the consequences of the Troubles. This is actually Clog, just outside Newry. It's about a 5-minute walk from where my parents live today. Now, I can tell you that this road today looks very, very different from it does in this image. This was probably taken, I would imagine, in about the 80s. And you can see in the sign there to the left, Dundalk, 11 miles. So again, Dundalk in the Republic of Ireland, this is Northern Ireland, and this was one of the checkpoints. You have this character on the left is probably a soldier, I think. The one on the right is an RUC, local police force. So very militarized, really had a huge impact on life. I remember personally driving, my mother is from Wexford, which is in the Republic of Ireland. We would go down there every summer. We had to wait a long periods in these, and sometimes the car would be opened by army officers, the boot would be searched. They were checking for, it was the region that I come from, there was a lot of IRA activity, South Armagh, but this was a real legacy of those Troubles. You can see here as well, this is a sort of a highlighted area of the border between the Republic and Northern Ireland. So we have Newry just down on the sort of lower right-hand side. Those black little boxes are watchtowers. There's quite a mountainous region around there. It's very beautiful, actually. And for most of my youth, up until I think I was about 21, those watchtowers were a permanent feature of the landscape. And you can see there's quite a few there. So it really changed the landscape there. Now, thankfully, those watchtowers are actually all gone. There's certain mountains that I can actually go up to the top of and see the sort of remnants. When I was a youngster, I couldn't go up there. I wasn't allowed to go up there. It would have been problematic. So this was a legacy of the Troubles. Complete disharmony between this natural region where there was historically a lot of interplay. Now, the Good Friday Agreement of 1998 was a godsend in that context. Because here we had a recognition of mixed identity. People could be Irish. I have an Irish passport, for example. You could be British. I don't have a British passport, but if I want to, I can have it also. And you can be both. So that question of the fractious identity was, in a sense, resolved. And it very much, I think, ended the Troubles. There are still some marginal remnants there, but, for the most part, the Troubles have ended. I mean, for me, that region, when I go back there, it's a very different place. The UK removed military checkpoints, and I think, crucially, sometimes underrated, EU membership of the United Kingdom and of the Republic of Ireland helped with the 4 freedoms. The 4 freedoms, I think, were crucial, an often underrated aspect of allowing people to feel that the island, for the most part, was one geographical unit. So as a result, we had a more integrated Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and a much more fluid border than had occurred for, I would say, about 50 or 60 years. So, taking us back to Brexit and leaving the single market and the customs union, we are told this is what the government wants to do. They want to leave the single market. They want to leave the customs union. The consequence for Ireland, I think, is a return to certain border controls. And I think also a lack of ease of movement. And I think it's often underrated that this could upset the delicate balance of peace created by the Good Friday Agreement and the 4 freedoms. And I think those consequences haven't properly been addressed. And in my last slide, I'm just going to wrap up. One of the potential consequences is NI, perhaps Northern Ireland, split more than ever. This is the last Westminster election. The red represents people who, I would say, perhaps want to remain part of the UK, don't want to be in the EU. The green, people who want a united Ireland, who want to remain part of the EU. And you can see the split between the Northern Ireland, much more split society than perhaps ever before. So thanks very much for listening.
Ganz lieben Dank, Alan Cummings von der Universität von Manchester. Als nächsten Sprecher haben wir Michelle Vaughan. Michelle Vaughan's presentation will be interpreted in consecutive.
Je vais vous parler en français, ce qu'on aurait peut-être pu avancer. Et puisqu'on a défini en quoi consistait l'euroscepticisme, je tâcherai de parler uniquement de ses origines. Et elles varient d'un pays à l'autre pour des raisons historiques. Pensez à la relation entre l'Angleterre et le continent européen. Et dans d'autres pays, pour des raisons économiques, pensez à la situation de la Grèce vis-à-vis de l'Union européenne. Et donc, il y a des variations dans le temps et des variations en fonction du passé et de certaines tensions économiques actuelles. À l'origine, ce qui a inspiré la résistance à l'augmentation des prérogatives de l'Union européenne, ça a été essentiellement une réaction nationaliste, pas forcément d'extrême droite, plutôt de droite, mais parfois aussi de gauche. C'est la conviction que des décisions relatives à ce qui se passe dans un pays doivent être prises par le gouvernement, par le Parlement, élu par ses citoyens, en vertu du principe que charbonnier est maître chez soi et que les étrangers n'ont pas à se mêler de ses affaires. C'est cette espèce d'attitude qui a influencé le non français, par exemple, au référendum qui portait sur la situation de l'Europe après le traité de Lisbonne. Comme vous le savez sans doute, ce refus était inspiré à la fois par la conviction un peu nationaliste dont je viens de parler et par la conviction de certains à gauche et dans le Parti socialiste en particulier que le régime de l'Union européenne n'était pas vraiment démocratique. Par exemple, parce que les membres de la Commission étaient nommés et n'étaient pas élus. Quant à la phase suivante et la plus récente de l'euroscepticisme, elle résulte essentiellement d'une résistance aux migrations dont le flux a cessé d'augmenter en ce siècle, à la fois dans les pays d'arrivée des migrants et aussi dans les pays d'accueil futur, même déjà présents. Donc, il y a eu d'abord la conviction que parmi les réfugiés politiques que l'on était prêt à accepter, il y avait aussi des migrants économiques et que cela ferait une concurrence déloyale en une période de chômage important et de difficultés économiques. Donc, une crainte de concurrence s'est ajoutée aux considérations plus nationalistes. Le Brexit en particulier, dont on vous a déjà parlé, a été l'objet de vote, surtout dans la partie la moins prospère des îles britanniques, et surtout de la part d'électeurs qui étaient moins qualifiés, sous-rémunérés et souvent au chômage. Et toutefois, il faut ajouter que dans ces parties de la Grande-Bretagne, il se trouvait le plus petit nombre de migrants en fait. Donc c'était une menace, mais c'était aussi l'inconnu qui est craint également. En fait, les migrants sont moins craints là où on les connaît. Et cela a été vrai dans beaucoup de pays, encore que ce soit moins vrai peut-être en Allemagne, où on commence à les connaître et également à les craindre. Donc, d'un pays à l'autre, il y a des variations sur lesquelles je voulais attirer votre attention. Et pour conclure, il faut parler de l'Italie, car les élections ont eu lieu hier, et que c'est un pays traditionnellement très pro-européen, mais on commence à voir ce qu'on attendait, que les résultats sont plutôt imprégnés de l'euroscepticisme. Et il se peut que les inquiétudes que l'on éprouvait à cet égard aient été justifiées. Il se peut que le président Jean-Claude Juncker ait eu tort de dire en termes plus explicites que ce qu'il emploie d'habitude, qu'il y avait là un danger pour l'Europe, et il se peut, hélas, qu'il ait eu absolument raison. Il y a encore beaucoup d'autres choses que je pourrais et que je souhaiterais vous dire sur ce thème, mais puisque nous allons entendre de la consécutive, il faut être charitable pour les interprètes, et je ne manque jamais à cette charité.
Ganz vielen Dank, Frau Wahn. Wir haben jetzt eine 20-minütige Feedback-Session mit den Tutoren. Dazu sehen wir uns alle wieder in ungefähr 20 Minuten.
There was going to be consecutive interpreting into English.
Okay.
We need to
Okay.
So basically, the students were able to listen to simultaneous from French into English in the headset, and so they can now do the context straight away into Japanese.
Right. Okay.
But they didn't have the full beginning because that's not something we realized in the beginning.
Didn't realise. That was very confusing.
Yes, very confusing.
I thought there was going to be a relay.
So we can now go in straight away to listen to your students and do English.
Ale bardzo dobrze.
Have a northern Northern Ireland, sorry. The northernmost island. I don't know.
Seems to be going that way.
It was, yeah. I'm really sorry we had to.
No, it was, I was finished. I was literally, yeah.
But
It was
it
like
was
the second.
really interesting.
Yeah, it was the
I
second
just went
last
through the slides yesterday or the day before. Yeah. I didn't realise, how long the troubles had lasted.
Yeah, it's like 30 years.
I know. It's crazy.
What do you think could be the solution for the border?
I think this solution is, the situation at the moment is good. So I don't think it needs a solution. The problem has been created by Brexit.
Yeah.
Actually, the situation was fine. There was no problem. So this is why the EU is saying, well, you have to come up with a solution because it's not something